What if the person you trusted the most was cheating on you under your own roof? Mariah believed she was living in a solid marriage built on love and partnership. But a simple message on her husband's cell phone was enough to destroy everything. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt her, it was the certainty that she had been deceived, manipulated, and left behind as if she were invisible. But if Mark thought she would cry and accept defeat, he was completely wrong. Without arousing suspicion, Mariah devised a meticulous plan. Every false smile, every innocent look, every perfect wife act hid a strategic move. While he believed he was in control, she moved the pieces with surgical precision. And when Mark finally realized it, it was too late. He had lost everything. Now the question is, how did she do it? Get ready, because this story will hold you until the very last second. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the faint aroma of toasted bread. Mariah was in the kitchen, amidst the usual morning chaos. Alex was tugging at the hem of his blouse, Max was trying to unzip his backpack, and Jonas, the youngest, was crying because he wanted cookies before breakfast. "Mom, have you seen my math notebook?" Alex asked, trying to balance the weight of his backpack on one shoulder. "It's on the shelf, next to the radio," he replied, without taking his eyes off the frying pan where he was cooking scrambled eggs. From the bathroom, the sound of the shower indicated that Mark was still getting ready, oblivious to the morning rush. Mariah took a deep breath. He never helped with the children. His breakfast, however, was always guaranteed and served just the way he liked it. "Vida, where's my blue shirt?" Mark shouted from the bedroom. "In the laundry basket," she replied loudly, out of patience. Mark's phone, left on the kitchen worktop, vibrated. A short, discreet sound. Mariah glanced at it. A message appeared on the locked screen. "Good morning, love. Don't forget our date tonight. I'm counting the hours." Mariah's heart stopped for an instant. She blinked rapidly, trying to absorb what she had just seen. The letters on the screen seemed to pulse before her eyes. "Mom, my juice!" Jonas shouted, shaking out his shirt. She blinked again and let out an automatic smile, pouring her son's glass as if nothing had happened. Her heart was pounding. Mark walked into the kitchen, as immaculate as ever, his hair still damp and his beard freshly shaved. He picked up the phone and quickly typed a reply before looking at her. "Is everything all right?" Mariah forced a smile. "Yes, of course." He picked up his coffee cup and took a satisfied sip. The message, however, burned in her mind like fire. Mariah spent the day like an automaton. She took the kids to school, did the shopping, came home, cleaned, prepared dinner. Everything as usual. But her mind was elsewhere. When Mark arrived in the evening, with that same charming smile and the smell of imported perfume, she felt a knot tighten in her throat. "How was your day?" he asked casually, dropping his briefcase on the table. "The same as the others, and yours?" "Tiring, a hell of a lot of meetings, that's a lie." Mariah kept her expression neutral and served dinner, as she did every day. As they ate, she watched him, every movement, every little reaction. When he had finished eating and gone to the bathroom, she picked up his phone, which he had left in the living room. This time, without hesitation, she unlocked the screen and entered the messaging app. The name in the conversation was a simple H. Mariah's fingers trembled as she opened the chat. "I'll see you at 8. I've chosen a special place for us." Anger rose in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She wouldn't make a fuss. She wouldn't make a scene. She took a deep breath and put the phone back. The next morning, without Mark noticing, she began to investigate every detail. She took out a bank statement and analyzed the expenses. Expensive dinners, gifts, hotel reservations. Not only was he cheating on her, he was spending the family's money on another woman. That night, as she lay next to him, she felt her whole body boiling with hatred. Mark was sleeping soundly, peacefully. Mariah turned the other way and opened her eyes in the darkness. She already knew what she was going to do. Mariah knocked firmly on Mrs. Angelina's door. The sound echoed down the narrow corridor. The neighbor opened with her usual calm manner, a slight smile on her lips, but it only took one look for her to understand that something was wrong. "Come in, miss," she said bluntly. Mariah came in and sat down at the kitchen table. The house smelled of freshly brewed coffee and cake baking in the oven. For a moment, she almost forgot why she was there. "I found out," she began, her voice firm but carrying something dark. Angelina sat down opposite him, folding her wrinkled hands on the table. "What exactly?" "That Mark has another." Silence hung in the air for a moment before the old woman let out a sigh. "Are you sure?" Mariah laughed humorlessly. "I saw the messages, I saw the expenses, I saw everything." Angelina was silent for a few seconds, just watching her. "And what do you intend to do with it?" Mariah didn't answer immediately. For the first time, she put into words what she was thinking. "I'm not going to cry, I'm not going to scream. He thinks I'm naive. I'll let him keep thinking that." The neighbor arched an eyebrow, interested. It looks like you're about to do something I'd approve of." Mariah smiled, a smile full of something new. "I need your help." The elderly woman took a sip of her coffee and nodded. "Count me in." Over the next few days, Mariah became Mark's shadow. She didn't confront, she didn't question, she just watched. He started arriving later, always a different excuse. "The traffic was terrible today," he said one evening as he dumped his briefcase on the sofa. She just smiled. "I can imagine." The game began. That afternoon, while Mark was in the shower, Mariah seized the opportunity. She took the bank statement out of the office drawer and looked at the numbers carefully. Something caught her eye. A secondary account. It wasn't the one they used to pay household expenses. It wasn't even the one where he received his salary. It was something hidden. Mariah felt a shiver run down her spine. She picked up her cell phone and sent a message to Mrs. Angelina. "There's more than I thought. He has hidden money." The reply came quickly. "Good. Now we know where to start." Mariah spent the next few days monitoring Mark's every move. She noticed that, in addition to the dinners and gifts, he was making regular deposits into the hidden account. "You're working hard, huh?" she commented one evening while he was serving himself dinner. Mark looked at her and smiled. "Yeah, more responsibilities." "I suppose so." She gripped her fork tightly. If there was one thing she hated more than betrayal, it was being made a fool of. The next morning, she took the children to school and went straight to Mrs. Angelina's house. "What are you thinking of doing?" asked the elderly woman, pouring coffee. Mariah rotated the cup between her hands. "First, find out everything about this account. Then I'll play along." Angelina smiled. "That's what I like to hear." That night, Mariah looked at Mark as if it was the first time she had really seen him. He was nothing but a liar. But contrary to what he thought, she was much more than just a wife. She was a strategist, and the game had just begun. Mariah stared at her cell phone for long seconds before typing. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. She knew exactly what she needed to do. "Baby, can you send me the bank pin? I want to buy something special for us." It was a short message, written in the exact tone Helena would use. She had studied the conversations, the way her lover referred to Mark. Now all she had to do was wait. It didn't take a minute. "Of course, Mammy. Use whatever you need." Mariah let out a cold smile. She had expected it to be difficult. But Mark was predictable. 10 minutes later, she was already inside his secret account. Her eyes roamed over the absurd amounts he kept hidden, months of regular deposits, a secret fund for his double life. Scoundrel. Angelina watched from afar, arms crossed. Now what? Mariah closed her cell phone. Now the counterattack begins. She knew she couldn't just withdraw all the money at once. That would make Mark suspicious. So she started with small transfers, amounts that might go unnoticed. A little today, a little tomorrow. That way, by the time he realized it, it would be too late. The strategy was working. Mark continued to live his life as normal, unaware that his financial reserve was being drained day by day. Then came the perfect night for the second move. Mariah prepared a special dinner for Mark, an elaborate, carefully prepared dish, and in the middle of it a small detail, something he couldn't eat: gluten. Mark was intolerant. Any trace of it was enough to put him to bed. He came home smiling, hugged her like the perfect husband, and sat down at the table. "This looks incredible." Mariah smiled. "I made it with great care." He ate without suspecting a thing. Every bite was one step closer to disaster. A few minutes later, Mark began to sweat. "I don't feel well," he muttered, pressing his stomach. Mariah kept her expression calm. Maybe it was something at lunch. Mark tried to get up, but staggered. "I need to lie down for a while." She helped him to the sofa. "Stay here. I'll get you some tea." She went into the kitchen and calmly prepared the brew. While the water was boiling, he took out his cell phone and sent a message to Mrs. Angelina. "He's down. Plan as expected." The reply came instantly. "Good. Now all that's left is the final blow." Mariah returned to the living room and handed the tea to Mark, who was already pale and in a cold sweat. "Drink up, it'll do you good." He sipped the hot liquid, unaware of the woman next to him. "You're amazing," he murmured before closing his eyes. Mariah watched as he fell asleep. Patience was the key to victory. The game wasn't over yet. Mark slept for over an hour. Mariah took the opportunity to go through his folder of documents in the office. There were bank statements, signed contracts, and even a hotel reservation booked for the following week. Helena's name was on the reservation as a companion. How convenient! She took out her cell phone again and took pictures of the documents. She needed proof of everything. Mark shifted on the sofa, groaning in discomfort. Mariah returned to the living room and watched him for a few moments. He was pale, but beginning to come to his senses. "How are you?" she asked, her voice soft. Better. But that was awful. It was just a bad feeling, maybe a bit of stress." He nodded slowly, massaging his temples. "It could be." She smiled, snuggling up next to him. "You work so hard, Mark. You should take more care of yourself." He turned his face towards her, surprised by the sweetness in her voice. "I know. I'll try." She held his hand. "I don't want to see you like this." He squeezed his eyes shut and sighed. "Thank you, love. You're amazing." Mariah smiled. She knew she wasn't amazing for him. She was being amazing for herself. The clock struck 7:45 p.m. when Mariah parked the car on an inconspicuous street near the restaurant where Mark used to take Helena. The street was busy enough that she wouldn't attract attention, but it still offered a strategic point. She adjusted the rear-view mirror and took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding, but not from nervousness. It was the adrenaline of being in control. At exactly 8:11 p.m., Mark showed up. He was dressed in his impeccable suit, with his hair in order and the expression of someone who felt like he owned the world. Mariah tightened her fingers around the steering wheel, watching. Seconds later, Helena appeared. A clinging red dress shone in the light of the restaurant. Her heels clinked on the floor as she walked up to Mark, tossing her blonde hair to one side. She smiled, and Mark grabbed her around the waist, pulling her into a quick, discreet kiss. Mariah pressed her lips together. With steady hands, he picked up his cell phone and started recording. "Yes, Mark. Keep giving me everything I need against you." The couple entered the restaurant. Mariah turned off the recording and calmly got out of the car. She walked down the sidewalk, keeping her distance, watching through the large glass window. There they were, sitting at a reserved table in the corner, laughing like teenagers in love. She took a few more photos. The perfect angle. The open betrayal. But suddenly, something unexpected happened. Mark's cell phone vibrated on the table, and he picked it up absent-mindedly. Mariah recognized the expression on his face. The tension, the hesitation. His own phone vibrated inside his pocket. A message. "Where are you?" Mariah felt a chill. He's sensing that something's wrong. But it didn't matter. She already had everything she needed. Before Mark could raise his eyes to look around, she turned and went on her way, disappearing among the pedestrians in the street. Half an hour later, She was home. Mrs. Angelina was waiting for her, sitting in the kitchen with a steaming cup of tea. "Did you get what you wanted?" Mariah smiled, taking out her cell phone and showing the photos. "I got everything." The elderly woman tilted her head, analyzing the images. "Perfect. Now all that's left is the final move." Mariah put her phone back in her pocket and took a deep breath. "And it starts now." She picked up the phone and typed a message to Mark. "You think you're safe, but I've lost count of how many times I've seen you with her." He pressed send. It didn't take a minute for the reply to arrive. "What do you mean?" Mariah laughed softly. The last piece on the board was moving. The clock on the bedside table read 6 a.m. when Mariah opened her eyes. The dim morning light was beginning to invade the room, but she had already been awake for hours, mentally reorganizing the last steps of her plan. Next to her, Mark slept soundly, his chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. He had no idea what was coming. Mariah carefully slid out of bed, picked up her cell phone and checked the screen. No new messages from him. Mark's silence was deafening. He was trying to understand what was going on. She smiled. With steady steps, she went to the children's room and watched Alex, Max and Jonas sleeping. In a few hours, everything would change. Mrs. Angelina was already waiting for her when Mariah arrived in the kitchen. The elderly woman was holding a small suitcase with a determined expression. "Is everything ready?" Mariah asked. "Ready and waiting." Mariah took a deep breath. "Then it's today." The old woman held her hand. "Are you sure?" Mariah nodded. "More than ever." At 7:30 a.m., Mark came down for breakfast, as he did every day. He wore a dark suit and checked his cell phone every few minutes. The tension on his face was evident. Mariah kept her composure, serving his coffee as if it were just another ordinary morning. "Did you sleep well?" she asked casually. Mark hesitated before answering. "Yes, I mean more or less." She smiled and sat down at the table with him. "Something wrong?" He looked up at her, trying to decipher her expression. "No, I just had a difficult day yesterday." She feigned concern. "You've been so distracted lately. Is everything all right at work?" Mark pressed his lips together, twirling the cup between his fingers. "Yes, just a few things to sort out." Mariah nodded. "I see." The silence continued. At 8:15 a.m., Mark picked up his briefcase and walked to the door. "Don't be late," she said sweetly. He hesitated. "Of course. I'll talk to you later." As soon as the door closed, Mariah turned to Mrs. Angelina. "Now." In less than 30 minutes, all the suitcases were in the car. Alex and Max were still drowsy, while Jonas slept on Mariah's lap. Before leaving, she took one last look at the house. Every detail was as it always was, but inside, everything was different. With one last deep breath, she closed the door and left. At 9 a.m., Mark arrived at the office and opened his laptop. The first thing he did was access his secret bank account. His expression changed instantly. The numbers didn't make sense. He blinked, refreshed the page. Nothing had changed. The balance was 0. Panic set in. He took out his cell phone and opened the banking app. He tried a withdrawal. The transaction was denied. His breathing quickened. Sweat broke out on his forehead. He picked up the phone and dialed Mariah's number. He called until it went to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. He sent a message. "Mariah, has something happened to my account? It's weird here." No reply. Then something inside him stirred. He typed another message. "Where are you?" Silence. It was only then that it hit him. Mark felt his stomach turn. He suddenly got up, grabbed his car key and hurried out. He had to get home. At 9:45 a.m., he parked in front of the building. He ran up the stairs, panting. He opened the door and entered the apartment. The silence was absolute. He ran into the boys' bedroom. The beds were made, the toys organized. No sign of them. He went into the bedroom. Mariah's closet was empty. Despair exploded inside him. Then he saw the envelope on the bed. With trembling hands, he picked it up and opened it. Inside was a short note. "This time, I'm the one who's gone. Good luck rebuilding your life from scratch." Mark's head spun. He had to sit down. This couldn't be happening. He tried to take a deep breath, but the air seemed to be running out. He picked up his cell phone and dialed Mariah's number again. He called, until finally it went to voicemail. He knew he would never get an answer, and for the first time Mark realized that he had lost everything, and for the first time he was the protagonist of his own life. The car's engine fell silent, and Mariah closed her eyes for a moment. The tiredness of the journey weighed on her, but not as much as the weight she had finally left behind. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw Alex, Max, and Jonas still drowsy. Angelina, sitting next to them, smiled with complicity. "We're here, girls." Mariah took a deep breath. Yes, finally. She opened the door and stepped out, feeling the fresh wind on her face. Their new home stood before them. It was a simple building, without the luxury of the house they had left behind, but that didn't matter. There was something there that never existed in the other place. Freedom. Alex and Max got out of the car, their curious eyes scanning their new surroundings. Jonas was still asleep in Mrs. Angelina's arms. "He's small," Alex commented, frowning. Mariah knelt down in front of him and held his hands. "Yes, but we're free here, and that's worth more than anything else." The boy seemed to think for a moment, then smiled and ran off to explore. Mariah watched her children as they walked along the sidewalk, excited about the new beginning. She had never felt so strong. Angelina approached, holding Jonas carefully. "What's next? What's next?" Mariah crossed her arms, looking up at the clear sky. "Now I rebuild my life in my own way." They helped the children carry the boxes inside. The apartment was empty, but there was an undeniable peace there. Every corner was a space to be filled with new memories, new stories. While she was unpacking, her cell phone vibrated on the table. She picked it up and saw a message from an unknown number. "You destroyed me. How did you do it?" She knew immediately that it was Mark. Mariah stared at those words for a few seconds, feeling a rush of emotions. It wasn't anger or pain. It was something different. Freedom. Without hesitation, she deleted the message and blocked the number. Mark no longer existed in her life. Angelina noticed his expression and arched an eyebrow. "He tried to contact you, didn't he?" Mariah smiled. "He did, but it doesn't matter anymore." The old woman nodded. "That's the spirit. You're in charge now." Mariah took a cup of coffee and sat on the sofa, watching her children play. "He never thought I could win." Angelina sat down next to her. "Men like him never think." Mariah laughed. "What do I do now?" The neighbor took a sip of tea and shrugged. "You do what you want, my dear. Life is all yours now." Mariah closed her eyes and felt a deep sense of relief wash over her. For the first time, she was the protagonist of her own story.